he chose. I'm Laura Bedwell, I'm the chair of the English department, and it's my pleasure today to introduce our three speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Sean Vinson. He is a professor and the Frank W. Mayburn Chair of Arts and Sciences here at UMHB. He is a Shakespearean by training and the author of 3 books with a 4th on the way, and many essays. His most recent article is called Salvation, Doom, and Romans 8 in Too Late the Phalarope. I went and looked up how to say that word. And it will be appearing this spring in Christianity and Literature. Dr. Benson and his wife recently celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary, and they have 2 children. In his spare time, he enjoys old movies, being outside, and reading. Please welcome Dr. Sean Vinson.
Well, good morning, everyone. If you know, especially if you're a student, if you know what your calling in life, as some people do, that's great. But that is not what my story is about, because when I was your age, this age of students, I had no idea what I wanted to do in life. So I'm going to draw upon a quotation from Shakespeare's Hamlet, where the character of Polonius, who is one of Shakespeare's great fools, has a moment of insight, and he says he's going to find, by indirections, he's going to find directions out. And that has been the story of my vocational path through life. By indirections, or going down the wrong path, I have found directions out in my life. So I'm going to share those with you today. I always tell my students when I'm advising them, if you're thinking about a career, start with what you love. And to my credit, I'll say this for myself, I did start with what I loved. I loved reading as a high school student. So I knew that when I went to college, I wanted to read great authors. That was really a draw for me. I wanted to read Shakespeare, Chaucer, Milton, Jane Austen, all those people. And my mother also was an English major, and I think that encouraged me, having her do that as well. So I knew that I wanted to study English. And I never wavered from that path, so that was good for me. But what do you do with an English major, as my dad once asked me? Well, I thought initially I would go to law school, so I did. After I graduated from college, I went to law school. I thought that's going to be my vocation. And a few weeks into law school, I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer. I had no interest in doing that. So after a semester, I dropped out of law school. And I'm actually, even though it's painful, it's always painful to quit something, but it's useful, because I knew I didn't want to do that. I loved literature too much. I didn't want to study law. I didn't want to draft contracts and wills and that sort of stuff. More power to lawyers, but it's not what I wanted to do. So I switched gears. I went back, I decided to get a master's in English. And I thought, well, I do like books, and since I want to share that, I'll go into teaching. I'm going to be a high school teacher. So I got a master's of arts in teaching. And I taught for 6 months in Bakersfield, California, at a school. And the bad thing is I was a kind of late hire, so I got six periods of freshman English, and they were all the same. So by the end of the 6th period, you can imagine, I was like, I was just reading yourself. So it was not it wasn't a good fit for me, but it was not only that, I knew that I didn't want to teach high school at that point. It just didn't interest me that much. So here I was at my second career path, and I don't want to do that. So I decided to go back to school yet again. And my parents, God bless them, were a little impatient, but they supported me, which is great. So I went back to grad school and got a PhD in English. I was very glad to do that. And when I got done, I thought to myself, I was so exhausted, because a PhD can be very tiring. And I was so exhausted, I said, I was lucky to get a job, but I said, I just want to teach. I don't want to work on a dissertation. I just written my dissertation, it's a book-length thing. I said, I don't ever want to write again. I just want to teach. So that's what I did for 5 years. And then after 5 years, and again, I do think that God He reveals His gifts to us over time. And after 5 years, I felt a desire to write. So I started writing. And I kept doing that, and I kept feeling more of a desire to write. But it's hard, as many of my colleagues can attest. When you're in a small college, you generally teach 4 classes in the fall and 4 classes in the spring. That's a very demanding teaching schedule. It makes for very little time to write. So I had to spend a lot of time, outside of class time, summers, writing. It's very hard, but I still felt this kind of call upon my life, both an interest and a desire to write more. So I started looking for jobs that would allow me to do that, and there aren't many of them. I was very fortunate that UMHB had the position, this position I'm in right now, where it does allow me to spend less time teaching. I teach 2 classes a semester typically, and I spend the rest of my time basically writing. And I still love teaching, but I want to write more. So it's a kind of really nice balance for me. And it took me, I don't want to tell you how many years because it will date me, but it took me years to kind of find out what I really love doing. And I do love it here. I love what I'm doing, but I only learned that because I took a lot of missteps, and I was patient enough to sort of change gears when I realized that something wasn't working. I have to say too that I think God calls us in various ways at various times. Will God's calling change in my life? I don't think so at this point, but one has to be willing to listen to the call that God gives us. And if He does call me elsewhere to other things in service to Him, I hope I'm willing to listen to that call and, like Abraham, go where He sends me. I do hope He does that after I retire. So I don't really want to switch jobs, but I've learned that God calls us in multiple ways, and part of just understanding who You are is being attentive to that call. And I've tried to be attentive to that call in my life, but I've taken, if you don't know where you're going, I understand where you're at, because I was there. It just takes a while to find your feet where you think you can best serve others. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker today is Dr. Joe Tapley. He holds a BA in Communication from Louisiana State University in Shreveport, an MA in Speech Communication from Louisiana University in Baton Rouge, and a PhD in Mass Communication from Florida State. He has been here at UMHB since 1995. When he came as department chair for the speech and theater department, which is no longer a department, things have reshuffled quite a bit since then. He enjoys teaching here because it gives him the opportunity to observe student development closely and to teach a variety of classes. Though he says his favorite UMHB semester was spring 2016 when he was the faculty member for London Studies. And he wasn't actually on campus. So, he is married to Martha, who is here with us today. They've been married for 36 years. They live here in Belton, and they have 2 children. Their daughter was an English major, so I know her. She's awesome. But they're both adults. And they do have also 2 cats, Callie and Magic. His hobbies include music, both playing and listening, and movies. So old movies seem to be a theme here. I think there's a reason these 2 are sitting together. He sometimes gets to teach film, but he is also the MC for the Central Texas Film Society. So if you want information about that, I'm sure he'd be glad to share. Please welcome Dr. Joe Tapley.
Thank you. I want to begin by telling you my favorite story about finding a path. In 2009, comedian Ellen DeGeneres was invited to give the commencement address at Tulane University in her hometown of New Orleans. She gave a moving speech about being true to yourself and always trying to be the best person you can be. And with her trademark dry wit, she advised the graduates to follow your passion, stay true to yourself, never follow anyone else's path, unless you're lost in the woods, and if you see a path, then by all means you should follow that one. That's good advice, I think. Finding the path you were meant to follow in your life can be challenging. How do you know what path you should follow? What guidance should you seek? How do you discern whether the choices you make are correct? These are tough questions. When I was a teenager, I had a Sunday school teacher tell me, I think we see God's will primarily in hindsight. And I thought about that, and I think, well, that's fine, but hindsight doesn't really help me very much in trying to plan what to do in the future. So, I found out now that there's another way to discern your calling, your path, that doesn't rely entirely on hindsight. I have a number of mantras that I recite to my classes. I'm sure they get tired of them. Things I want them to remember, though. More information is preferable to less. It's good advice in filling out an exam. Don't make your audience work to understand you. No one ever complained about a speech being too short. But the one that has resonated most strongly with me is the one that I shamelessly stole from the theologian and writer Frederick Buechner. Listen to your life. As Buechner put it in his book, Now and Then, A Memoir of Vocation. This is Buechner's writing. If I were called upon to state in a few words the essence of everything I was trying to say, both as a novelist and a preacher, it would be something like this. Listen to your life. See it for the fathomless mystery that it is, in the boredom and pain of it, no less than in the excitement and gladness. Touch, taste, smell your way to the holy and hidden heart of it, because in the last analysis, all moments are key moments, and life itself is grace. So if I'm to take my own advice, what events can I look back on and see as the key moments, as I see now in hindsight? How can you know if you're experiencing something you need to listen to? Let me tell you about 3 of my experiences. Hopefully that will give you some guidance on that. Event 1 I call advanced math. When I was a child, I was a huge air and space nerd. I was fascinated by the space program, airplanes, missiles, by the science and engineering that underlay those technological achievements. I thought about being an astronaut after asking my puzzled father why he wasn't an astronaut. But that quickly morphed into a desire to be an aeronautical engineer, design aircraft and spacecraft. By the time I was in high school, that desire was still there, but I began to look more closely at what I needed to do to achieve that goal. In my senior year of high school, I took a class called Advanced Math. It was kind of false advertising in a way. I had done well in Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, other math and science courses that I had taken. I was fine on that because I was on the college preparatory track, and the teachers advised me to enroll in what amounted to trigonometry and pre-calculus. I was stuck. I realized that I could solve the equations, I could understand the concepts, my grades were fine, but there was no joy in it. I felt constantly on edge that I would find the wrong solution or solutions. I found out that sometimes there's more than one solution, and you can't find all of them. But I would find the wrong ones. And that would lead, I came to understand that I didn't want to go into a field where a mistake I made could lead to a crashed airplane or an exploding rocket. And I didn't feel that confidence. God was talking to me through my life, and even though I didn't realize it, I was listening. Event 2 is interesting because Dr. Vinson mentioned law school. That's Event 2, law school. While I was in high school, I was introduced to academic debate. The way we did it was 2 teams and 2 debaters each from different schools would meet in a tournament and engage in carefully structured and organized argument about a pre-announced topic. I adored the process of researching and classifying and presenting these arguments and trying to persuade someone. Then a judge would pick a winner based, usually, on the quality of evidence and arguments, not always. But I loved the teamwork. I was proud to represent my school and work with my fellow students. So what does a debater do when they grow up? Well, they coach debate, but also, more likely, they become a lawyer. Many of my colleagues and competitors on the high school and college debate circuit ended up in law school, and I thought that might be what a path I was meant to follow. It seemed natural at the time. I continued debate through college and promptly applied to law school. I was accepted at the Paul M. Hebert School of Law at Louisiana State University and went off to pursue my dream of becoming an attorney. I thought everything was going fine. I took the usual first-year courses in contracts, torts, civil procedure, and lots of other stuff. I enjoyed the camaraderie with my fellow classmates. I loved learning to think and talk like a lawyer. And I felt that my debate experience in my undergraduate education was leading me in the right direction for just this moment. All that came crashing down in January of 1981 when I returned to campus after Christmas break to see the grades posted on the bulletin board in the law school building lobby. Yes, in 1981, LSU did post their grades publicly on a bulletin board in the middle of the lobby. By social security number, not by name, but still, old days. I was 0.2 percentage points short of the cutoff. I was, in the bland language appended to the posted grades, ineligible to continue. I eventually enrolled in the master's program in the Department of Speech and Drama at LSU, took wonderful courses with great professors, wrote a thesis, met my future wife, got married, got my degree, and moved on in a new direction. But for someone who had never known academic failure before, it stung. In the boredom and pain of it, Buechner writes, life itself is grace. It was true, but that didn't make it any easier to swallow. Sometimes when your life speaks, it is in a harsh, strident, unpleasant voice. My third event is a book I never ordered. In 1988, I was teaching as a visiting instructor and forensics coach, still coaching debate, and trying to figure out what I should do. I graduated from my MA program in speech communication some years before. So should I go back to school for a PhD? If so, in what field? Should I try something else? At the time, I was a member of something called the Quality Paperback Book Club. It sent subscribers a monthly catalog with a featured selection, and they promised that if you want the month's featured selection, you need do nothing. I love that phrase, you need do nothing. It will be sent to you automatically. If you do not want the featured selection, please return the enclosed postage-free card indicating your choice. Their business model was built around people like me who forgot to return the card. And so they were therefore stuck with the featured selection. So one month, the featured selection was something called the Media Lab, Inventing the Future at MIT by a man named Stuart Brand. As I did quite often, I neglected to return the card, and shortly thereafter the book arrived in my mailbox along with an invoice. I was a little disappointed in myself. It's not the first time that had happened, but I bit the bullet, mailed the check to PBC, and then I set this book aside because I was kind of represented failure. I don't want to look at it. After a while, I began to look at it, and I'm so glad that I did, because it opened up my eyes to a new field of endeavor. In the Media Lab, Brand discussed the brand new Media Lab at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where visionaries saw the future of human communication using all manner of shiny new technology. New views on television, computer-based communication involving some kind of network that allowed the interchange of ideas, an internet, if you will. This was heady stuff in 1988. I was riveted. I now knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to go back to grad school, get my PhD in mass communication, and eventually I did, with an emphasis in new communication technologies. And I wanted to teach. Brand's book made me look at communication and technology differently. I saw for the first time that a computer wasn't just a machine that counted or a machine you could type on. It was a communication device. So 3 events spoke to me in different ways. 3 voices that I now see were clear as a bell if I would only listen. Some were painful, some just annoying. But as Frederick Buechner put it, coincidences are God's way of getting our attention. So pay attention, listen to your life. It's telling you something.
Our final speaker today is Dr. Rubin Mendez. She is originally from Veracruz, Mexico, but she's lived most of her life in the United States. Dr. Mendez holds a BA from the University of Texas Pan American in Edinburgh, Texas, and an MA from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. She also has a PhD in Spanish literature from University of Nebraska-Lincoln, with a focus in Spanish Baroque poetry. She's interested in Spanish and Spanish-American women writers, contemporary poetry in Spanish, and the use of technology in the classroom. In addition to teaching about these things, she is a poet herself. She's published some of her poetry, including some publications in the Baylorian here on campus. So if you want to get a copy of one of her poems, I can hook you up. Currently, Dr. Mendez serves as the co-chair of the Department of Modern Foreign Languages and the co-director of the ESOL program.
Thank you. Well, I brought PowerPoint. I'm a very visual person, so I know, so it helps me keep focus, right, kids? summarized in 3 different aspects. Being clueless, facing detours, yes, and being persistent. That's the 3, I guess, ingredients for me to have found my path in life. And as you see, those are all majors, and probably I'm trying about half of them. So, what I'm trying to tell you, even if you are clueless, you still need to try, because if you don't try, you do not know. So I did not keep that to myself. I went ahead and took the classes until I was like, oh, this is not for me. And then finally something magic happened. Okay, so I have a quote here. But as it is, God arranged the members of the body, each one of them as He chose. God has equipped us with talents, not just to fill out our professional life, but to serve the body of Christ with our work. All we have to do is open our hearts to God and pray in prayer what is His will for our lives. So I see the path that I chose at some point. I think I see myself as the body of Christ in my professional life, not just picking a profession, but that is something that was perfect for me. So as I mentioned, the magic moment was when I got a thank you card. That's the moment I chose my path. And then I started working diligently and persistently to attain it. So I was in a Spanish class, and the professor at times was not that clear. So, and I was taking kind of like to film my electives, but then I saw my classmates struggling, and I felt sorry for them. And I said, okay, how about if let's meet in the library and I'll walk you through it. I'll help you. I mean, I'm a native speaker, so I guess I can help you. So it was like a round table, and there were all them, Anglo students, and they were like listening to me, and then, we studied the whole semester, and many of them were very successful, and I got thank you cards, still makes me almost want to cry. And that moment when I got those cards, I was like, this is my call, this is what I want to do. I want to teach young people, like, my classmates. I'm not interested in K-12, I'm a little kid, no. But I want to work with young people, but at that point, I was still young kids, okay? So that's when that magic moment happened. That card that enabled me to see that I was able to serve and to be good at something and to just really, really enjoy it. So, of course, there's work to do. So that's when you have to become very proactive. So there was graduate fair at my school down in Edinburgh. There was this table from the University of Nebraska, and I never heard of Nebraska before, but I said, okay, why not? So I went to ask, and they actually told me, well, if you want to do a master's, we offer you a stipend, and we pay for your tuition, and you gotta do is teach one lower level class. And when they said to teach lower level, I said, I'm in. So without hesitation, I signed up. And that first class, that was just marvelous. The first time I stepped into that classroom, of course I had the butterflies. I still do sometimes, but depends. But it was just an amazing experience, and I knew that was my call in life. And I did my master's, kept on teaching, got a job with the University of South Dakota as an instructor. And then in 2013 or so, I had a very deep conversion into my Christian call, a real closeness to God. So, how God is, He doesn't want us to be in the comfort zone. So He planted a seed and said, now you have to work on your PhD. And of course, you know, I had at that time 3 boys, and I had just gotten married with my ex-spouse, and I was, well, you know, maybe that might be something for me. So I took that challenge, and I started, I would teach my full load, and I would drive once a week, 3 hours and a half to campus in Lincoln, Nebraska, attend my seminar for about 3 hours, and come back. So I did it like that for 6 years, until I finished my PhD. So that was time in which, of course, it was not easy, no. But if you keep God at the center of your life and you are looking to fulfill that call that He had planted in your heart, you can do it. You know, persistence will lead you anywhere. All you have to do is work really hard and allow God to help you. Of course, there were moments that I had another child, so it was like nanny, baby, me going to campus. But that's, if you want to do it, you have the will, there's a way. Oh, there's another scripture. For a dream comes with much business, and a fool's voice with many words. So what you have to do, you have to work, not just talk about it, right? You work. And again, another thing I would like to share is don't despise humble beginnings. As I mentioned, I started as a TA, teaching young people, and that was marvelous. Of course, the pay wasn't that good, but it gets better. It gets, as you get your education and as you get your experience, you are compensated. But out of everything, the greatest compensation is to fulfill your call in life and to know that God has blessed that choice you made. So that's one of my classes, and it's just every semester is just marvelous. It's just a new set of students, and just sharing my passion, sharing the language, the culture, and I tell my students, you guys are my favorite class. Of course, there's always that semester's favorite class, and it's happened to be these kids. Acknowledge it. But it is just, it doesn't feel like work. It feels like, oh, I'm going to go have fun, and I'm getting paid for it. Awesome. What a deal. Again, you know, there's bumps on the road. You're going to face challenges. You're going to face many things, many issues, but persistence, again, is what gets you to your goal, you know. Not just complaining about it, singing about it, but doing something about it. But there's a way. You have to be very conscientious about how to attain your goal. Ask others how did they get there, and follow their path, you know. And of course, prayer, you know, would lead you to many marvelous inspiration, many role models. Look for role models. That's very, very important. And sooner or later, that's when I got my PhD, my great mentor, Dr. Williamson, there. So, if I did it, you can do it too. And again, you know, just serve our Lord with your gift in your professional life, in your personal life, but it is a gift to be able to work and to make a living. Might as well serve the Lord with what you do. And then the greatest blessing, coming to MHV. Why? Because as I mentioned, I had a deep conversion, and then I was a Spanish professor, a Spanish teacher, so combining both, it was a blessing to be hired because I was a great teacher and because I was Christian. What a deal, you know, just the gift of being myself, just be a blessing to this institution that has treated me so well, and so thankful. And you will find your treasure as you work on your path. Some pictures. I'm going to Ecuador by the Cotopaxi, I think that's what it's called, the Cotopaxi. So in summary, Do not be afraid of change. Explore the careers that might trigger interest, even as 4 or 5. That's okay. That's all right. Be open to hear the voice of God directing your steps. Embrace the path and work hard to reach your goal. Be persistent. Give thanks to God at all times. Enjoy your walk on your path. Y buena suerte, amigos. Thank you.
Question time? Yes. So, I think this session goes until noon, is that correct? 11:50 or so. 11:50, so that people can get out. That means we've got 20 minutes for questions. So if anybody has questions they would like to ask our presenters. Any questions? Come on.
Go back to one of the questions.
Oh, we've got one in the back that's ready.
For Dr. Carter, I think, is that what you can...
Dr. Taberley?
So how are they going to different colleges and like going to multiple different subjects?
Could you repeat the question?
How is it going from multiple subjects throughout your life, like learning?
You mean teaching different and learning different things? Yeah, that's a great question because my undergraduate degree, undergraduate degrees are fairly basic. They kind of give you the foundation to study further. That's really all they do. So my undergraduate degree was in speech communication, and my master's degree was in it's a subdiscipline of communication called rhetoric and public address. And my master's thesis was about some speeches given by Mississippi Governor Ross Barnett. So that was about as different as you could get from my PhD work, which was in mass communication and new communication technologies and television. It was a completely different change, and it largely came about because I read that book, The Media Lab, and that kind of pushed me in that right direction, which is why I thought that was so important. But switching they're still within the same general area, but I think you can, I feel like communication is broad enough that you can find something that you like and that you pursue with passion in 2 different ways. And the great thing about that was those 2 different paths, that's led me to have a much broader area of teaching responsibilities, and that's fun because that allows me to be I've always said that nobody at an institution the size of UMHB can afford to be too much of a specialist. And you always have to be, the term I like to use is utility infielder. You have to be able to do different things and do different things reasonably well because you can't be the one guy who studies only this, one tiny little thing and work here. So that has allowed me to expand my horizons and teach a lot of different things, and I never would have had those experiences had I studied only one thing. And I think that's a wise thing to do. Even in your undergraduate experience, you can take a variety of courses and you can get involved in a number of different groups that will help you, number one, to become a more broadly well-rounded scholar, and number 2, might show you a path you hadn't thought of. And then you see something and you get involved in it and think, this is where I need to be, or this is what I want to explore further.
I don't need to.
You don't need that?
No.
Okay. Talk loud then.
I have another question for Dr. Taberley. Was there, as you've kind of grown more in your vocation, had more education, is there a point in your life where you've been able to realize it's one of those moments and listen to your life?
I mean, since the last one I talked about, which happened in 1988, let's face it. That's an excellent question, and when a professor tells you that's an excellent question, that's professorese for I don't know. Just to let you know that. I'm sorry, did I let the secret out? I didn't. That's a really good question. It gives us time to think about that. Yeah, there have been moments when there were situations in my life where, for one thing, in a higher education, tenure is a major milestone. I mean, you're normally 6 years, then you apply for tenure, and if it's granted, then you're pretty much in. If it's not, then you have another year to teach and then go off and find other work. And that's kind of how it works. In the military, they call that up or out. Either promoted or you leave if you're an officer special. And in higher education, it's pretty much the same way. And that was a major milestone. I remember after I got tenure in 2002, I think. Yeah, 2002. Somebody in our church said to my wife, "Oh, so I guess y'all are going to stay here." And she thought, "Well, I never thought about it that way, but yeah, I guess we are." And that would be a major thing. So if that hadn't happened, if that hadn't worked out, we'd have had to have chosen other things. And that was a moment when something happened that reaffirmed the path that I was on. And I think that's something that I've worked with. And I've tried to work since I've been on the promotion and tenure committee several times as a professor, trying to help professors who are still on the tenure path to work toward that and to get their ducks in a row and get everything ready to go for that application, because that's hugely important. And it can make a big difference in your life. That would be one of them. Give me 20 minutes, I could probably think of some others, but that would be the one that I would think of right now, since that one.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
This is for everybody, all around. So if there's one thing you could tell your younger self, whether like undergraduate, graduate school, whatever, about just like listening to what your calling might be, what is like your biggest tip in doing that? And then the one thing you would tell yourself as you were going through that.
I've been talking a lot.
I can give a quick answer. I would tell my younger self, I used to think when I was your age that God would tell me what I was supposed to do. He can work that way, and I don't want to dismiss that, but in my life, I've learned that I need to look at my abilities and my interests. And if those two can align with something, that tells me that I think that's God's calling in my life. So I have to have the ability to do something. I didn't go into medical school because I'm not very good at the sciences. It tells me something. But also my interests. I have to know what my interests are. So those two align, to me, that God uses our abilities and our interests to lead us in the right direction. So he didn't tell me directly what I needed to do, but he gave me the ability to discern that through prayer and other ways.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's like, it feels good. It just feels like you have the ability to perform well and you enjoy it. So that's what makes it. When you feel that moment, that's when you gotta, work hard towards that goal.
I'm going back to quote Frederick Buechner again. I'm going to have to pay him royalties. I've been quoting him so much today. But he said, "Your calling is where your deep gladness and the world's deep need meet. Whatever you find that you feel deep gladness in, that the world needs, that's where your calling can be." I also teach a book in one of my classes called Calling and Clarity by a guy named Doug Cascale. It's a wonderful book. And in it, he talks about different types of calling. One type of calling he talks about is direct calling. And he uses examples from Scripture and other things where, the classic example is, Moses in the burning bush or Jonah being told to go to Nineveh, those types of things, where God specifically speaks to someone. And he emphasizes that doesn't happen to everybody. So if you sit there waiting for that to happen your whole life, you may never do anything. So there are other types of calling. There's missional calling and general calling. And I'll let you read the book and figure out what that is, but that's beyond the scope of this answer. But don't wait for that. I think Dr. Benson's statement about that is absolutely true. Don't sit there waiting and have paralysis by overanalysis, that you never do anything.
Do you need the mic?
No, I'm okay.
Okay.
I can say loud. So my question is kind of similar to that one, but I also want to know, so I'm about to graduate, so what would you give any advice for like students who are about to graduate, about to go into the world and try to find a job and find a place to live? Is there anything that you can share from your personal experience about what that's like, or how you kind of beat the fears, or any
take a job. You'll find out if you like it, and you can always switch. You know, you gotta. I thought I was going to do one thing right after college, and I was wrong. Right? So I think just being open to it, you'll find out if that fits you nicely. And you know, the great thing about our country is you generally have options to do other things. So if it doesn't work out, you'll know. You'll gain some valuable experience. Everything I did that I didn't want to do was still very important and valuable to me.
Knowing what you don't want to do is a very important piece of information. And sometimes you can't figure that out unless you actually do it. It sounds great, and then you do it, and I tell that to students who are in our internship program in our department, that a negative internship experience, unless it's just really horrible, abusive or whatever, but it's somewhere you feel bored or unchallenged, that's a very important piece of information to know. You don't want to try that again. So yeah, take everything and don't prejudge what it's going to be.
I guess I was saying, you have to be proactive. You have to start connecting with the officer, the career services, see what's available, see all they have to read a test. I think Mr. Owens has a test about what type of job you based on your abilities and start finding. You're not 40 hours, one hopefully, or you get 2 or 3 or whatever open, and then you can fit. But you have to be very proactive. Don't sit up, after graduation. No. You need to start way before. Because, your life is not going to immediately run smoothly. You have to have your plan. You have to be very proactive.
Thank you.
This is kind of for all three reasons you want to answer. So you guys went through a lot of. Can you hear me? Yeah. Sorry.
That's fine.
Okay. I just wanted to ask, because you guys went through a lot of not career changes, but passion changes. So how are you able to take a step back and be okay, yeah, that's not for me, especially with law school. I feel like that's a big that's a big deal going to. So I just wanted to have you really say okay, this is not for me. I need to move on.
Joey, you didn't make a choice.
Yeah, for me, the choice was made for me, so that wasn't an issue. But I think in deciding I had the opportunity when I finished my master's degree to go into a lot of fields. I could have done a lot of things. In fact, I had some people that I'd gone to master's program with who were involved in non-teaching but still communication-related consulting groups and stuff like that, and they said, "Does anybody want to try this?" And I thought about it. But I really didn't want to do that. This was not something that I thought about the possibilities, but ended up deciding that teaching and academic achievement would be my goal.
When I started taking those finance courses and business courses, they were really boring. And I was, this is not going to be enjoyable, So I did decent, because my parents were paying the tuition and I didn't want to blow it, but it was more it felt so hard, it felt really this is not going to work out for me, But then when I had that tutoring experience, that felt so good, so smoothly, and I can do this, I can continue dipping my knowledge in Spanish and I can teach, that felt really good.
I want to say, Dr. Mendez organized this whole session, so I want to say publicly thank you. I just showed up, you did all the work, so I appreciate it. When I left law school, it was very painful because I had no sense of what to do. But, it was a blessing because it forced me to think about what do I want to do? What am I really good at? What will I enjoy? But I will say, it was painful at the time. I went through, I lost a sense of identity. And that can be part of, finding who you are and what you want to do. But it was painful for me, I will say that.
So, for all of you guys, you're successful professors now, how do you deal with academic failures? To be left lost, how did you deal with that emotionally?
Time heals all wounds, I think. I think once you get to a certain distance from it, you realize, well, that was probably the best. I was just thinking a moment ago while Dr. Vinson was speaking, I would have been a terrible lawyer. I just think I'm not built for that. I just can't really do it. And I thought I could, but I think it was probably best that I did not pursue that goal. So, but for me, it was just simply time. It just, once you eventually get to the point where it doesn't feel as bad, and also other successes and other affirmations have come along that other people are saying, hey, you can do this, this is really good. And I found that in my master's program, that I took classes with professors who were interested in what I had to say, thought that I could do this, and that helped to heal that failure. But I think time is really the only thing that I can mention.
I would say over time you learn that failure is a great teacher. It's a cliche, but it is true. My first Shakespeare paper I wrote as an undergraduate, I got an F on it. Leaving, I did, and it taught me something about what I was doing wrong. So, but it's painful. But you learn as you get older that that's okay. Because you think about your own life, the things you did wrong or incorrectly, you learn to do them better. That's it's a valuable lesson. I tell my students that. I don't really care what their grades are. Sometimes you get a lower grade if you learn something really valuable. So it's not always about getting the A.
And unless you don't try, you don't know, I knew I was going to be a horrible businesswoman. I mean, I couldn't survive, but I would have been so happy probably looking like 20 years older now, and I don't want that. So I think it's, I could have been making so much more money and stuff, but it would have been me, So it's okay to try it, and then you find out what you're good at.
I think we have one more here.
How often did you rely on God for decision making? I know that sometimes He only comes into your mind in certain situations, but how often do you see the signs or rely on God for your decision?
I think the point that I would make in my presentation and answer your question is always be listening and always be aware, because you never know when something's going to come along that will steer you in that direction. And always look at everything that happens to you, whether good or bad, as, is this something that's trying to tell me something? A lot of the time it isn't. It is something that's just sort of random and you don't need to worry about it. But if something keeps coming up again and again, or you feel a particularly strong motivation to go in a particular way, that might be something you need to listen to. But you never know when it's going to happen, so be aware all the time.
I'll say you be mindful to include God in every, as much as possible in your day, because you cannot navigate it without His help, just have that humble attitude that, I cannot do this by myself, God, can you help me? And then He'll put role models, He'll put people to help you, to walk you through, to rebuild your life, to do everything that God knows is good for you. Just be humble and ask Him for help.
I would just add to that God has already created you to be a certain type of person. He's given you gifts and talents, and acknowledge that, and just see what He's made you, the kind of person He's made you. And that, I think, is very useful in thinking about what you ought to be doing professionally.
All right, well, thank you all for coming. Let's give our presenters